Interestingly enough, my first contacts in broadcasting was when I was 13. I used to write questions for Selwyn Toogood for the Quiz Kids, and he used to say, sometimes, there's another question from Chris Bourn in Stratford. And little did I know, and little did he know, that a few years later I was his very first television producer for the Family Game in 1966. Anyway, I became a presentation director. I didn't know what it was. The television manager from Napier who sent me down for the interview didn't know what it was. I got down and was interviewed by Don Donaldson, the station manager, and Ash Lewis, the man behind the 1974 Commonwealth Games. And at the end of the interview they said, "Would you like to come upstairs?" And I went upstairs in WNTV1, Waring Taylor Street, Wellington, this old studio. And in the studio was a guy, producer named Douglas Drury, and he was doing a children's program. And you know, I went into this half gloomy control room at all the people, all the monitors, and the hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I thought, that's for me. That's the job I wanted to be. So I gave up school teaching, and that's where my career started. At that time, the rugby union were dead against television. They just didn't know what was going to be the consequence, but they didn't want us to do it. Tom Pearce, I think, was the chairman. He didn't want us to do it. Came this day, and it was a cold, very wet winter's day in Wellington, and the crowds flocked in, and this was going to be the first telecast. To say that I was nervous was certainly an understatement, and to make it worse, that in actual fact, half an hour before we actually the whistle went for a kick-off, our main camera at the top of the Millard stand went on the blink, and it was one of those cameras about the size of a house with a huge Veritol lens, and the other cameras of course all had a turret on the front, and you had to rack the turret round, and it went on the blink, and we had to send our floor manager all the way back down into the centre of Wellington to get the only other zoom lens, and we got it, and we brought it up all through the crowd, all through the Millard stand to the very top, and I kid you not that when the 2-minute call for the kick-off came, that was the first time that I actually saw my main camera. Needless to say, I didn't even know what the score was at the end of the game because you just concentrate so hard. Peter Reid was a local radio announcer, and he had this wonderful love of the night sky. You go into his home, and he was a painter as well, and all of the walls are covered with shots of the moon and one thing and another. But the interesting thing is, it used to screen at 7:45 at night. Absolute prime time, 15 minutes. Peter used to provide me with all the material. As a director, I put it all together. And I remember one particular time, and it was popular, one particular time when we met one of the astronauts that first went on the moon. And I tell you what, if I was nervous at times with my production, Peter Reid could hardly talk. The fact of having somebody so famous in his program was almost too much for Peter. But it was one of those many programs, like cooking programs and gardening programs, and Night Sky was another example of the small 15-minute program that the public just loved, and they loved the people that were in them. If there was a program that I might be known for, it was Studio One, went for 8 years, which was essentially a talent quest. And I used to tour the country looking for talent. And we found some fantastic talent. I must tell you a funny story about one guy from the West Coast. We were auditioning people in Christchurch, and he came on and he took out a carrot and he played the carrot. And I didn't know where to look. I was with my musical director, Garth Young, and he didn't know where to look either. But what worried me even more was the fact that in actual fact they were told to prepare 2 numbers, and I noticed hanging out of his pocket was a parsnip, and so there was a real worry about what we were going to get. But it was a lovely experience, I've got to say, and I just love the fact that so many of the people that we actually found are still performing and have been a wonderful part of show business for so many years. The night that we turned to colour, at 8 o'clock at night, we were in black and white. Marama Koya, or Marama Martin, was the continuity announcer. She started in black and white, and suddenly everybody in the country that had colour suddenly saw her in colour. And that was a lovely kind of thing. And the other really nice thing was the Commonwealth Games was the thing that really made colour. People were standing in the shop fronts in the evening just looking at the shops that had colour. But Harold Anderson, who was the producer of the Commonwealth Games, had an extremely clever opening sequence. He had a person with a javelin run up in black and white and throw the javelin, and as the javelin passed through the air, it changed to colour. And then the success of the Commonwealth Games was assured, let alone the fact that Dick Taylor, of course, was such a winner on the first day of the athletics. I directed all the boxing, and I, at that stage, was a total light entertainment producer, and Ash Lewis asked me would I like to be a director. I didn't need to be asked twice, and I was down there. And as a little anecdote of that, my production secretary, who sat beside me for the whole 127 bouts, never faced the screen, I don't think, in the entire time. She hated boxing. Meanwhile, I had to go on and carry on with the directing. Starting from absolute scratch, we got put together 12 countries. I became the international coordinator. We got the 12 different countries. We actually did it in the Christchurch Town Hall with Peter Sinclair, the inimitable and famous and reliable Peter Sinclair as the front man. Rob Guest was the first New Zealand singer. We didn't win. It was won by the Japanese. But I can remember in particular, it was a very, very big production, and we really stretched all our facilities. This was 1980. We really stretched our facilities, and I remember sitting in the front row as an international coordinator. Everything had been going well. We had the best light ent director this country, possibly international light entertainment director, Malcolm Kemp, directing, so we're absolutely sure things were going well. And then at the end of the 12 songs, we threw for the first time internationally to Canada. That was the first one, and we said, Canada, come in please with your votes. And I mean, so my heart stopped, and then suddenly there was Canada, and they were there, and they said, well done Television New Zealand, the scores are, so forth and so on. And it just went so smoothly for something that was just so big. I was asked by Alan Smythe, who used to put together all the big Domain concerts, whether I would direct live on the super screens, his Coca-Cola Christmas in the Park, his Symphony Under the Stars, and certainly the Opera in the Park. And this really, the reason that I loved this was it was live. And no rehearsals to speak of. I would attend the rehearsal on stage the night before, but I certainly, it all just went into my mind. I had no chance of blocking it in with shots and that kind of thing. But I used to love this, and every year I used to direct it. Do you know that sometimes there were 250,000 people in the Domain? It was just extraordinary. I was sitting in the little outside broadcast van, and it was pulsing. I could hear the people and their reaction, and just the whole atmosphere. It was just pulsing, and it was just a lovely experience. And one of the other nice things about it was that once again I was dealing with not only live entertainment and live music, but they found some people like Hayley Westerner came through it, and I was dealing again with new people who I could talk to and mix with and so on. One of the lovely things about my career is I never had a boring day in my life. And I was just so lucky at being a pioneer. And when I started, not only did I meet my wife in 1964, but being a pioneer, we weren't trained, we learned. And the viewer was always the most important person. Nowadays, there are lots of other things on top of the viewer. But the viewer, and we were given a chance to experiment, we were given a chance to try things out, and the team thing was hugely important, and I loved that. But I think, apart from the not ever having a boring day in my life, it's music. Anything to do with music, the performers, the writing of it, the recording of it, I loved the lot. And even today, there's not a day goes by that I don't have music in it somewhere. And television gave me that. And for that alone, I am extremely thankful.